I'm glad Jay went first. He describes himself as a radical libertarian, and I've been described by most as the hard word liberal. And so we're perhaps coming from different viewpoints. But despite the fact that he went to Newman High School and I went to Country Day, I think we could get into a room, both agree that this debt is unsustainable, and stay there for how many hours it took until we came out to an agreed-upon recommendation, which is not happening now at the federal level. I appreciate the nice comments that were made about me by Joe. I brought my mother here so that I could acknowledge that I've been trading on my father's reputation for a long time. And Joe apparently hadn't talked about to the 50% of the people that don't appreciate me in the same way. But all that said, as I listen to Joe and talk about the dollar rising, interest rates going up, imports outranking exports, GDP, the number of young that have to take care of elderly, currency flows, those kinds of discussions I don't think will get America to face this issue. I think that the one consistent thing that we all understand is that when you got too much debt, when you owe too much money, you're heading for trouble. And I think that's the basic issue that we're all facing. Let me try to put this on a personal, business, and civic level. On a personal level, I'm fortunate enough to have some assets invested in the stock market. And despite the fact that people were making $15,000 a year, were getting a loan on a $750,000 house, and some argued, outliers argued, gee, this may mean that we're heading for trouble. And the word was, no, prices will continue to rise. America's a great nation. Don't really worry about it. Well, that cost me 50% of my portfolio. And I'm sure some of you had the same experience. Fortunately, we seem to have come back a little bit. Makes us all feel a little bit more comfortable. But when you hit the wall, at least I will be looking very carefully. I've got my financial advisor here, and I'm going to call him up on the phone and says, get me out. Let me see if I can pass this. The day that China says, don't think I'll buy the paper, Andy, I'm going to call you up and say, let's get out, let's stand on the sidelines. And when that happens in dramatic numbers, it has a tremendous impact on the economy. The next thing that happened on this hitting the wall in my own business, and we employ 700 people, usually the banks are watching very carefully the financial statements of the developers to make sure that the developer doesn't go south. A developer very rarely watches the financial statements of a lender to make sure that the lender won't go south. Well, we had $80 million of projects, and we got a notice one week that the bank was not going to make the next draw. We could not pay the laborers and the workers on the project, and we were in trouble. Fortunately, we had good relations with other institutions. Despite this demise, we were able to scramble out of it. But that could have been very meaningful to the 700 people that we employ. On a civic level, the reason I'm a member of the CED is I'm not the head of Texaco or one of these big companies, at least on a national basis, is that the fellow that had the CED at that time, Brad Butler, retired chair from Procter & Gamble, devoted his life to early childhood, thinking that if you catch kids early, that would be a good, productive investment and better than any other educational investments. And I was leading that in the state of Louisiana, so he called me up and said, would you join the CED and help us with this effort, which I did. And then I read the other day, as we're getting proposals, at least from the Republican Party, and I'm not going to brag or criticize any of the parties. The Republicans don't want no taxes. We'll solve it with abuse, fraud, and waste. And if they just get rid of governmental regulations, as Jay would argue, then we'll grow our way out of this problem and debt won't be an issue. And we'll cut services and the rest of it. And then the Democrats will say, no, you can't cut any services. You can't reduce the age of elderly. Health care, we just got this passed. You can't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So that's the kind of dialogue that's going on, and nothing is happening. So I read the other day that early childhood is going to be cut dramatically. So what I realized that when we hit the wall, if all these predictions turn out, and I believe that they're real, government won't have time to do cost-benefit analysis. They won't have time to figure out which program is really productive, really helps, and which program doesn't help. It'll all get cut with a meat cleaver. So for all sorts of reasons, we don't want to hit the wall again, particularly from a business point of view, because it gets us. And I think what they're asking us is go talk to our Congress people and say, stand up. And I watched Merkel the other day, the Chancellor of Germany, who is, because of the way the government is organized, perhaps has more power than at least in their country, than the president would in ours. But she basically said to Portugal and Ireland and Greece and Spain that we got the money and we will bail you out only if you fix your expenditures and fix your tax rates. And so somebody's stepping up. And then I saw on television the governor of New Jersey, a guy named Christie. Some disagree, some agree, but he basically stood in front of the people. He's a Republican governor in a Democratic state, and he said, look, it's not a question of getting together and figuring out what to do. We already know what to do. You've had two major commissions that have told you exactly what you have to do to get out of this problem. The problem politically is you can't say it. Well, I'm going to say it. We're going to cut the retirement age by a couple. We're going to do this with health care. And I have not vanished. So I think leadership will actually benefit from facing these issues and calling it like it is. And I think we in the business community, I know in my own, I go to Washington all the time to fight what's good for us. So I know these people, and you know these people. Most people in the room have paid careful attention to government and can get their attention. So I think it's an important movement that you're embarking on, and glad to be a part of it, and I've signed your piece of paper. Thank you.